Welcome to another spine-chilling episode of Dark Forces by Skoob, where we explore the legends that refuse to stay buried. I'm your host, Nile Cross, and tonight we're stepping into a bathroom, turning off the lights, and facing one of the most enduring supernatural legends of our time. Picture this. It's 1987. A group of kids huddle in a darkened bathroom during a sleepover. One flickering candle casts dancing shadows on the walls. Someone dares the others to say her name. They hesitate. The silence is deafening. Then a whisper breaks through. Bloody Mary. For a moment, they swear they see something move in the mirror. It starts like that, somewhere between game and nightmare, between reflection and apparition. But who is this vengeful spirit that has haunted generations of children? Where did she come from? And why, after all these centuries, do we still fear to speak her name? Tonight, we'll journey through history, folklore, and documented encounters to uncover the terrifying truth behind the woman in the mirror. Let me take you back to Tudor England, to the year 1553. Mary Tudor ascends to the throne, becoming England's first female ruler. What should have been a moment of triumph becomes the beginning of a tragic legacy that will echo through the centuries in ways she could never have imagined. Mary was nicknamed Bloody Mary for ordering 300 of her subjects burned at the stake in her desperate attempt to restore England to Roman Catholicism. But here's what makes this moniker particularly cruel. Her father, Henry VIII, executed not only 2 of his wives, but also 57,000 of his subjects. Yet it was Mary who carried the bloody epithet. Being England's first female ruler meant she was constantly ridiculed and undermined, her struggles mocked by a court that never accepted her authority. The historical Mary's personal anguish runs deeper than political turmoil. Court doctors recorded that she suffered from heavy blood flow, pelvic pain, and debilitating cramps. At 38, she married Philip of Spain, desperately hoping for an heir to secure her Catholic restoration. What followed was a series of phantom pregnancies that devastated her psyche. At 38, then again at 42, Mary experienced all the symptoms of pregnancy without ever bearing a living child. Some historians suggest she confused stomach cancer with a fetus. Others believe she had stopped menstruating due to early menopause. Imagine the psychological torment. A queen whose legitimacy depended on producing an heir, experiencing the hope of pregnancy only to have it repeatedly torn away. This deep anguish, this cycle of hope and devastating loss, would prove to be the perfect foundation for a ghost story that would haunt children for centuries to come. Mary's reign was short, but marked by intense religious turmoil. Her desperate longing for a child, combined with her brutal methods of religious enforcement, created a perfect storm of tragedy and violence. Had she succeeded in producing an heir, England's religious future might have been dramatically different, and perhaps her posthumous reputation would never have transformed into the spectral figure that visits us in mirrors, long before Bloody Mary became a schoolyard dare. Mirrors held a special place in supernatural practice. The art of scrying, seeking visions in reflective surfaces, has ancient roots that stretch back through centuries of human civilization. The practice appears throughout literature and religious texts. Think of the Bible's reference to seeing through a glass darkly, or Shakespeare's witches in Macbeth peering into supernatural visions. Chaucer and Spencer wrote of mirror divination, understanding something we've perhaps forgotten, that mirrors are more than simple reflections. But it was in Victorian times that mirror rituals took on their most romantic and terrifying forms. Young women were instructed to perform specific rituals, particularly on Halloween or other liminal nights. Picture this: a young lady walking backward up a staircase, holding a candle in one hand and a hand mirror in the other. As she gazed into the glass, she hoped to glimpse the face of her future husband. But sometimes, and this is where the romance turned to horror, instead of a lover's face, she would see a skull, foretelling her early death. These courtship charms carried an inherent danger. The same ritual that might reveal true love could just as easily reveal doom. It's this duality, this balance between hope and terror, that makes mirror divination so compelling and so frightening. The modern Bloody Mary ritual retains this atmosphere of eerie anticipation, but it's transformed the old courtship charm into something much darker, a direct encounter with malevolent supernatural forces. Instead of seeking love, we're now inviting vengeance. Instead of hoping for a future, we're summoning the past's most tormented spirits. The relationship between a woman and her mirror has always been complicated. Our reflection reveals our mortality day by day. For young girls especially, mirrors become symbols of transformation, of bodies that bleed monthly, that will one day open in childbirth, and that will eventually decay with age. As Sylvia Plath wrote in her haunting poem about mirrors, "In me, she has drowned a young girl, and in me an old woman rises toward her day after day like a terrible fish." To understand why Bloody Mary resonates so powerfully, we need to examine the historical context of how women, mirrors, and supernatural power intersected. In the 16th and 17th centuries, the accusations of witchcraft reveal a society's deep fear of female power and independence. Listen to how easy it was for a woman to be branded a witch. If she begged at a neighbor's house for a pitcher of milk, witch. If she crashed a wedding and asked for a sausage, witch. If her plants grew taller than her male neighbors, witch. If she was better at steering her plow than the men around her, witch. If she pulled a blanket down from a shelf and a toad jumped out, witch. The accusations become even more telling when we look at social circumstances. Poor, witch. Widowed, witch. Had neither father, son, husband, nor brother, witch. If she was a midwife and through no fault of her own, a baby died during childbirth, witch. If women appeared as witches in their neighbors' dreams, then they were definitely witches. Perhaps most heartbreaking were the women accused because they had black eyes, bruises on their arms and legs, and cuts all over their bodies. As their husbands suggested, they'd been beaten by the devil and were definitely witches. In reality, they were likely victims of domestic violence. But in a society that feared female independence, it was easier to blame supernatural evil than male brutality. Women could even be accused of witchcraft for their relationships with animals. If a woman was seen talking to or looking at ferrets, hedgehogs, mice, rats, rabbits, squirrels, weasels, snakes, owls, or insects, witch. One supposed witch kept bees under a rock and called them out so they could drink blood from her pricked finger. Interestingly, fish were one of the few animals not suspected as a witch's familiar, perhaps because they lived in a realm completely separate from human interaction. This historical context helps us understand why Bloody Mary, as a feminine spirit associated with mirrors and supernatural power, carries such potent terror. She represents centuries of fear about women who exist outside male control, women who possess knowledge and abilities that threaten established order. The beauty and terror of the Bloody Mary legend lie in its variations. Like all true folklore, it adapts to each generation while maintaining its essential power to frighten. Let me walk you through the different ways she's been summoned across the decades. In earlier versions, often performed by my mother's and grandmother's generations, girls would hold a hand mirror and walk up a flight of stairs backward, chanting Bloody Mary with each step. Some variations required flushing a toilet and whirling around 13 times. Others demanded a blood sacrifice. Participants would prick their fingers and smear the glass with their own blood, creating a physical connection between summoner and spirit. But it was the 1970s slumber party version that became most iconic. Picture the scene. Girlfriends gathered in a darkened bathroom, the only light coming from a single flickering candle. They'd stare into the mirror and chant, "Where is your baby, Bloody Mary?" This variation is particularly chilling because it directly addresses her maternal grief, the loss that supposedly drives her vengeful spirit. The 1980s brought new variations as the legend spread through schoolyards and summer camps. Some required participants to spin in place 3 times while chanting her name. Others demanded an unbroken stare into your own reflection. It was this sustained eye contact with yourself that supposedly sealed your fate. The number of repetitions varied too. Sometimes 3 Bloody Mary chants were enough, sometimes 5, sometimes 13. Modern versions have adapted to our digital age. Social media platforms are filled with videos of people attempting to summon her on camera, often reporting sudden cold spots, flickering lights, or distorted faces appearing in their reflections. The ritual has found new life in viral challenges, proving that even in our skeptical age, the power of the legend endures. But regardless of the specific method, all variations share common elements: darkness, mirrors, repetition, and the brave or foolish act of speaking her name. Each version reshapes her slightly, and that's her true power. She becomes whatever each generation needs her to be. In the most chilling versions of the Bloody Mary legend, those attempting to summon her must repeat a phrase that cuts to the heart of her supernatural rage. "Bloody Mary, I killed your baby." These words transform the ritual from a simple dare into a confession, an admission of the ultimate crime that supposedly binds participants to her vengeful spirit. According to these variations, Bloody Mary is the ghost of a mother who murdered her own children, driven mad by circumstances we can only imagine. Other versions describe her as a woman brutally slain shortly before or after her wedding, a bride whose future was stolen, whose maternal dreams were destroyed by violence. The invocation of her name becomes both challenge and invitation, calling forth a restless entity who appears with blood streaking down her face and fury burning in her hollow eyes. Some storytellers paint her as a betrayed bride, a woman whose trust was shattered on what should have been the happiest day of her life. Others describe her as a wronged woman, seeking justice for crimes committed against her. Still others whisper that she was a witch, executed for dark practices that may have been nothing more than herbal healing or midwifery. The exact origins remain deliberately obscure. That's part of the legend's power. But the themes are consistent: female suffering, overwhelming guilt, and vengeance that transcends death. Bloody Mary's story becomes a cautionary tale about vanity, about sin, about the dangers of summoning forces beyond our understanding. What makes these variations particularly terrifying is how they position the summoner. By saying, "I killed your baby," participants aren't just calling a ghost. They're accepting responsibility for the ultimate violation. They're inviting the wrath of a mother whose child was stolen, murdered, lost. In a world where maternal love is considered sacred, this represents the most unforgivable transgression. The ritual becomes a form of supernatural Russian roulette. Will she appear? Will she forgive? Will she drag the confessing soul into whatever realm of torment she inhabits? The uncertainty, the risk, the direct confrontation with grief-fueled rage. These elements combine to create a legend that refuses to die. Now let's examine the documented cases, the stories that have been recorded, investigated, and passed down as more than simple folklore. While skeptics dismiss these as hysteria or hoaxes, the consistency and detail of these accounts have kept paranormal investigators interested for decades. One of the earliest recorded encounters dates to rural England in the early 20th century. Villagers in Norfolk reported seeing a pale woman with blood streaked across her face wandering near an abandoned manor. The property had supposedly belonged to a Catholic family persecuted during the Reformation. According to local oral history, those who mocked the Virgin Mary or the Queen herself were visited in dreams by a woman crying for her lost child. This regional ghost story, sometimes called Mary Worthington's Curse, represents one of the earliest documented connections between historical religious persecution and the Bloody Mary phenomenon. The legend gained new power in mid-20th century North America. At an Illinois boarding school, students claimed that after chanting Bloody Mary 13 times before a bathroom mirror, a female apparition appeared with hollow eyes and long black hair. More disturbing, they insisted she left physical evidence, scratch marks etched into the glass surface. School administrators dismissed the incident as mass hysteria, but local newspapers picked up the story, making it one of the first modern mirror hauntings to receive media attention. In Pennsylvania during the 1970s, a group of teenagers attempted the ritual in a farmhouse basement. According to their testimony, after the summoning, an image of a woman's face remained burned into the mirror's surface. The house subsequently gained local notoriety when neighbors began reporting flickering lights and disembodied cries of, "Where is my child?" emanating from the property at night. The incident became the subject of a regional radio program called The Lady in the Glass, cementing Bloody Mary's place in American ghost lore. Perhaps the most famous modern case occurred in Chicago in 1983. Police were called to investigate reports of vandalism at a high school. Inside a girls' restroom, they discovered multiple shattered mirrors and faint red handprints smeared across the walls. The students involved insisted they had been summoning Bloody Mary during a Halloween sleepover when the lights began flickering violently and the mirrors cracked spontaneously. Although investigators officially blamed pranksters, several witnesses later reported recurring nightmares of a screaming woman staring at them from behind their own reflections. In 2005, students at a Chicago school made headlines when several participants fainted after attempting a Bloody Mary dare. Witnesses claimed the mirror actually cracked during the ritual. A 1994 case in Texas involved a girl who screamed nightly for weeks after an encounter, insisting that Bloody Mary had followed her home and was hiding under her bed. These documented cases share common elements: multiple witnesses, physical effects that investigators struggle to explain, and lasting psychological impact on participants. Whether you believe in supernatural causes or attribute them to suggestion and group hysteria, the consistency of these reports across different times and locations suggests that something powerful is happening when people gather in darkness to speak her name. Before we delve deeper into the supernatural aspects, let's examine what science tells us about the Bloody Mary phenomenon. Understanding the psychological and neurological factors at play doesn't diminish the legend's power. If anything, it makes it more fascinating. Researchers have identified what they call the strange face illusion, a documented psychological phenomenon that occurs when people stare at their own reflection in low-light conditions. After about 10 minutes of sustained eye contact with their mirror image, participants consistently report seeing distorted faces, sometimes their own aged or transformed, sometimes completely different faces altogether. The neurological explanation involves how our brains process visual information in low-light conditions. When lighting is poor and we're focusing intensely on a single point, our peripheral vision begins to fade. Our brain, trying to make sense of incomplete visual data, starts filling in the gaps with images from memory, expectation, or fear. The shadows and shapes around our reflection become faces, figures, movement. Add the psychological factor of expectation. If you're specifically trying to see Bloody Mary, your brain is primed to interpret any visual anomaly as evidence of her presence. The ritual's elements amplify this effect. Darkness reduces visual clarity, repetitive chanting creates a trance-like state, and the fear of supernatural encounter heightens awareness of every flicker, every shadow, every reflection. Group psychology plays another crucial role. When multiple people participate in the ritual, social pressure and shared expectation create a feedback loop. If one person claims to see something, others become more likely to interpret their own visual experiences as supernatural. The power of suggestion in group settings has been well documented in psychological studies. But here's what makes the Bloody Mary legend particularly compelling from a scientific perspective. Even understanding these explanations doesn't eliminate the experience's impact. When you're 12 years old, alone in a dark bathroom, science doesn't matter. The fear is real. The adrenaline is real. The sense that something is watching you from the other side of the glass is absolutely real. The legend persists because it taps into primal fears that exist below our rational mind. Fear of darkness, fear of the unknown, fear of our own mortality reflected back at us. It combines ancient anxieties about mirrors as portals between worlds with modern understanding of how isolation and expectation can create vivid psychological experiences. But what happens when the ritual goes too far? Throughout history, folklore has not only described ways to summon Bloody Mary, it has also preserved the knowledge of how to send her back. The process of breaking a Bloody Mary possession combines ritual cleansing, symbolic reversal, and the reassertion of one's own identity against an invading presence. According to traditional accounts, the first crucial step is severing the mirror's connection. Mirrors have long been considered portals between physical and spiritual realms. Once opened, they must be properly sealed. Folklorists document various methods: covering the mirror with black cloth, shattering it into pieces, or in extreme cases, removing it entirely from the location where the summoning occurred. However, destruction alone is often considered insufficient. Many traditions insist that mirror fragments must be buried at crossroads or submerged in running water, symbolically dispersing the spirit into neutral ground where it can no longer feed on human energy. The crossroads represent a place of decision and change, while running water has been considered spiritually purifying across countless cultures. Fire and light play essential roles in cleansing rituals. Those seeking to break Bloody Mary's hold are advised to burn white candles while reciting prayers or affirmations of protection. The light represents purity and divine authority, said to repel the darkness that Bloody Mary brings with her. In Catholic regions, priests have historically performed minor exorcisms, using holy water and making the sign of the cross over contaminated mirrors. Spiritualist traditions rely heavily on salt, that ancient purifier sprinkled along doorways and windowsills to prevent the spirit's return. Each method reflects a shared belief that light, faith, and symbolic action can restore the balance between the living and the dead. Those who claim to have experienced partial possession describe the purging process as both physically and emotionally draining. Common symptoms include feeling cold, dizzy, or weak after the encounter, followed by vivid dreams where Mary's voice gradually fades into silence. Folk traditions prescribe specific cleansing baths made with salt water or herbal infusions of sage, rosemary, or hyssop, herbs long associated with purification and spiritual banishment. The most intriguing accounts describe a compassionate approach to banishment. Rather than treating Bloody Mary as a mindless demon to be destroyed, some traditions suggest acknowledging her pain and offering forgiveness or prayers for her lost child. In these versions, understanding the anguish that created the haunting becomes the key to peaceful resolution. As we moved into the digital age, Bloody Mary didn't fade into obsolescence, she evolved. Today, she lives on TikTok, in horror films, in haunted houses, and in viral challenges that reach millions of viewers worldwide. Her story adapts to each new medium while maintaining its essential power to terrify. Social media has given the Bloody Mary ritual unprecedented reach. Videos of people attempting to summon her rack up millions of views, with participants filming themselves in darkened bathrooms, chanting her name, and documenting whatever strange phenomena they experience. The comment sections become modern folklore repositories, filled with viewers sharing their own Bloody Mary encounters and variations of the ritual. The digital format has created new elements to the legend. Now participants watch for anomalies in their phone cameras, faces appearing in the background, distortions in the recorded image, or technical malfunctions that occurred during filming. The smartphone screen becomes another type of mirror, another potential portal for supernatural contact. Horror films have embraced and expanded the legend. Movies like Candyman drew inspiration from similar mirror summoning rituals, while direct adaptations have explored Bloody Mary's origins and motivations. Each cinematic interpretation adds new layers to the mythology, influencing how future generations understand and perform the ritual. Haunted attractions have made Bloody Mary encounters a staple experience. Visitors are led into darkened rooms with mirrors and challenged to speak her name, with actors or special effects providing the supernatural response. These commercial applications demonstrate how the legend has become embedded in our entertainment culture. But perhaps most fascinating is how the legend continues to serve as a rite of passage for young people. Despite our scientific understanding, despite our digital skepticism, children still gather at sleepovers to test their courage against Bloody Mary. The ritual provides a controlled way to confront fear, to prove bravery, to participate in a tradition that spans generations. The legend's persistence suggests it fulfills psychological needs that transcend cultural changes. In our modern world full of answers and explanations, Bloody Mary represents mystery. In our connected age, she offers genuine solitude and introspection. In our rational society, she provides a space for irrational belief. As our journey through the Bloody Mary legend draws to a close, we're left with profound questions about why this particular ghost story has such enduring power. She represents more than just a scary tale told at sleepovers. She's a mirror reflecting our deepest anxieties about identity, mortality, and the unknown. The legend speaks especially powerfully to young girls navigating the transition to womanhood. Bloody Mary embodies the fears surrounding female sexuality, reproduction, and power. Her story resonates with anxieties about bodies that will bleed monthly, that may one day open in childbirth, that will eventually age and decay. She represents the dark side of feminine experience, the pain, the loss, the rage that society often asks women to hide. But Bloody Mary's appeal extends beyond gender. She speaks to universal human fears, the fear of what we might become, the fear of confronting our own mortality, the fear that speaking certain words or performing certain actions might fundamentally change us. When we stare into that darkened mirror, we're not just looking for a ghost. We're confronting ourselves. The ritual itself serves as a form of controlled fear experience. It allows participants to face terror in a relatively safe environment, to test their courage against supernatural forces, to prove they're brave enough to speak forbidden words and stare into the darkness. It's a way of practicing for bigger fears, bigger challenges that life will inevitably bring. Perhaps most significantly, Bloody Mary represents our complicated relationship with the past. She's history made personal, the weight of centuries of female suffering given form and voice. When we summon her, we're acknowledging that the past isn't truly past, that the pain and injustice of previous generations continue to haunt us, demanding recognition and reckoning. The legend also reflects our fundamental desire to believe that there's more to existence than what we can see and measure. In our rational, scientific world, Bloody Mary offers a space for mystery, for the possibility that consciousness might survive death, that strong emotions might leave permanent impressions on the physical world. Whether she appears as a vengeful mother, a betrayed bride, or an executed witch, Bloody Mary serves as a repository for stories that might otherwise be forgotten. She carries the weight of historical trauma while adapting to contemporary fears. She's both ancient and modern, both specific and universal. Next time you find yourself alone, staring into a mirror in dim light, pause. You're not just seeing your reflection. You're standing at the edge of history, psychology, and something far stranger. Maybe Bloody Mary is a ghost. Maybe she's a mirror into our own fears. Either way, her story forces us to ask, what are we really summoning when we say her name in the dark? Some legends fade, others never die. If you think you know the full story, think again. Download the Skoob app now to uncover what really lies behind the mirror. The truth, the fear, and the chilling origins of Bloody Mary.